of Indigenous Services, Mandy Galmasti. We will begin with remarks and then we will move on to the question period, first in the room and then online. If you're a reporter online, you will use the raise hand function to ask a question. I will pass it over to the ministers.
Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. Good morning. Bonjour. Thank you for joining us for the third update on this year's wildfire season. I'm pleased to be joined today by Parliamentary Secretary Corey Hogan and Minister Galmasti. You know, across the country, it's been a really hot and dry summer, and this has, of course, contributed to above normal fire activity with fires in mainly British Columbia, Manitoba, Saskatchewan, and more recently, Newfoundland, Labrador, New Brunswick, and Nova Scotia. À tous les Canadiens et aux communautés touchées par les feux de forêt.
To all Canadians and communities affected by the wildfires, know that you have the support of the federal government. Our government is doing everything in its power to support people affected by the wildfires.
To the first responders here in Canada, and also to those who came here from other countries to lend a hand, we are deeply, deeply grateful for your support. This wildfire season is now Canada's second worst on record in terms of hectares burned, and wildfires have consumed an area roughly the size of New Brunswick. And to put it in perspective, this is about double the usual average. As of August 18th, there are 707 wildfires currently burning in Canada. The National Wildland Fire Preparedness level is at level 5, and that means that firefighters and equipment are in use in every province and territory in Canada. So far, there's about 563 firefighters, international firefighters here from 6 different countries, including the United States, New Zealand, Australia, Costa Rica, Chile, and Mexico, and they're mobilized across the country. I want to assure Canadians that we are working around the clock to support provinces and territories. And since our last update in June, I've approved additional requests for federal assistance, and they've come in from Saskatchewan, Newfoundland and Labrador, and this weekend I approved a request for assistance from Nova Scotia with respect to wildfires. And really, I'd like to tell you a little bit about what that means in terms of assistance. This can include anything from support from the Canadian Armed Forces, which would mean airlifting people that we need to move, sending helicopters out to transport goods and to transport people, and helping by sending personnel out to help with planning and coordination and logistics. Assistance has also taken the form of the Humanitarian Workforce Program, and these are groups of people who help by finding shelter for evacuees, by helping distribute essential supplies like food and water and hygiene kits, by helping provide reception and registration services, and most importantly, by helping provide psychological resources to those affected by the wildfires. To ensure that provinces and territories have the support they need to deal with these wildfires, the Government Operations Centre is the center that continues to work with Canadian Armed Forces, with the Coast Guard, with the NGOs, the humanitarian workforce that I just mentioned, and the federal and provincial and territorial partners so that we can send out all of the resources that are necessary. Once again, I would like to extend my heartfelt gratitude for all of those who put themselves in path of danger to help our communities. And that includes first responders such as firefighters, emergency management officials, local volunteers, members of the Canadian Armed Forces, and the Canadian Coast Guard. You have been completely committed to keeping people safe, and our government thanks you so much. You know, I had a chance last week in Saskatchewan and then a few days ago in Edmonton to personally thank members of the Canadian Armed Forces and also local emergency teams for their service on behalf of all Canadians. Keeping Canadians safe is really a clear directive from the Prime Minister, and in his mandate letter to me and to my colleagues, that was crystal clear. And that's why building long term resilience with respect to these wildfires and other emergencies is not just a government priority, it really is a personal commitment of mine. We're working right now on a plan to better support provinces and territories in responding to immediate threats. And that really means looking at things like how we can strengthen coordination and capacity across jurisdictions, across provinces and territories, so that communities have the tools they need to respond, to recover, and to rebuild. You already know that hotter than usual temperatures are expected to last really through September across most of the country. And we're going to expect a continued high risk for wildfires basically through the rest of the summer. The federal government will be here for Canadians, for you, for your families, and for your communities, and we'll work to keep each other safe. Thank you. Merci.
Uh, are any of the other speakers going to be speaking?
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Bonjour tout le monde. I am Corey Hogan, Minister Hodgson's Parliamentary Secretary at NRCan, and I'm pleased to be joining my colleagues for an important update as we face this wildfire season. So before we begin, I'd just like to acknowledge that I'm joining you virtually from Calgary, traditional territory of the people of Treaty 7 in southern Alberta, which includes the Blackfoot Confederacy, comprised of the Siksika, the Piikani and the Kainai First Nation, the Tsuut'ina First Nation, and the Stoney Nakoda, including the Chiniki, Bearspaw, and Good Stoney First Nation. And Calgary is also home to the historic Northwest Métis and to the Otipemisiwak Métis government. So, as we heard, many communities across Canada continue to face devastating wildfire conditions, and our thoughts are with those currently evacuated from their homes, those on the front lines working tirelessly to protect people and property, and all those who have lost homes, infrastructure, and unfortunately, even loved ones this year. I want to extend my sincere thanks to the firefighters, first responders, and volunteers on the front lines, keeping people safe and protecting lives and property. My gratitude extends, like Minister Olszewski, to the crews from Mexico, Costa Rica, the United States, New Zealand, Australia, and Chile, who have provided really invaluable support during these difficult times. Their efforts underscore that wildfire is a global problem and collaboration is essential. So far this year, there's been over 4,500 wildfires in Canada, resulting in almost 7.8 million hectares burned. And that is already close to 3 million more hectares than the entire season last year. Looking ahead, forecasts point to elevated wildfire danger for August across the north and west, as well as parts of Atlantic Canada. Now, in September, shorter days and cooler temperatures typically lead to fire activity winding down in northern regions. However, above normal activity is expected to continue across the west. To strengthen Canada's resilience in the face of these threats for the rest of the 2025 season and beyond, today we are announcing an investment of over $540,000 in 2 wildland firefighter training programs, which will train near 100 new firefighters in Saskatchewan and Manitoba, provinces especially hard hit by wildfires this year. This investment includes $335,000 for Yorkton Tribal Council in Saskatchewan to support training of 35 volunteer firefighters in their community, and just over $200,000 for the rural municipality of Piney in Manitoba to support the training of up to 60 individuals. C'est simple. En offrant à plus de Canadiens en formation en comparaison.
It's simple. By training more people to fight these fires, particularly in areas that are hit by these devastating wildfires, we will improve our management and intervention capacity.
Announcement is part of a federal government plan of $28 million investment to train more than 1,000 new wildland firefighters by 2028, especially in remote, rural, and Indigenous communities across Canada. Excitingly, the addition of these 95 trainees has put us on track to train over 2,800 wildland firefighters in Canada, greatly surpassing our original target of training over 1,000 community members. Soyons clairs, nous ne sommes pas inactifs pendant que
We will not stand by while our communities are facing wildfires. Our government is investing to improve our capacity to fight fires, to acquire specialized equipment, and to provide support to citizens who need to evacuate their homes or rebuild.
we will continue to meet this moment with the urgency it demands and the determination it deserves. Merci. Thank you.
Minister
Thank you.
Galmasti? Go ahead.
Thank you. Bonjour. Hello. Thank you, everyone, for being with us today. I want to first acknowledge the immense hardships that so many Indigenous peoples and Canadians are facing right now. From relentless wildfires to severe storms to landslides, this season has truly tested Indigenous communities in ways that we have never seen before. À tous ceux qui ont un deuil,
To all those who are grieving, all those who have left their homes, all those who are living with uncertainty, we stand with you.
last months, I've been in regular contact with First Nations leaders, emergency responders, and provincial and territorial partners and ministerial partners about the situation on the ground. This includes conversations with Grand Chief Seti, the Lac La Ronge Indian Band Chief, the Loon River First Nations Chief, Chief Loon, and so many others. I want to thank Indigenous leaders as well as their first responders and emergency management teams for their tremendous leadership in response to this crisis. I also want to thank my colleague, Minister Olszewski, for her work, whether it's making sure rapid and appropriate support reaches peoples or mobilizing the Canadian Armed Forces for evacuations. Her leadership and the dedication of her team has made a real difference in protecting Indigenous communities. Since April 1st, there have been 165 emergency events impacting 134 First Nations communities, resulting in 88 evacuations. As of now, 25 communities continue to battle wildfires, and there's 12,000 individuals from First Nations across provinces that remain evacuated, primarily in British Columbia, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, and the Atlantic. Through the Emergency Management Assistance Program, also known as EMAP, we cover 100% of eligible costs tied to emergency events. That includes support for evacuees, as well as host communities, provinces, territories, and service providers. Throughout the wildfire season, EMAP has backed recovery efforts across the country and invested in long-term capacity. We're now funding over 300 emergency management roles within First Nations communities, tribal councils, and organizations. This investment in local leadership and preparedness is the key to stronger, safer communities. C'est clair que les changements climatiques rendent
It's clear that climate change is making these types of disasters more frequent and more intense, as well as more widespread. For many First Nations, particularly those in more far-flung areas, the impact is enormous. Having to evacuate, they often have to evacuate more than 18 times more often than other communities.
generations of expertise in fighting wildfires, rooted in profound relationship with their lands and territory, is a wisdom that is not only invaluable, but it is essential. Emergency strategies must be built on it. A great example of the Wildfire Resilience Initiative is supported by Natural Resources Canada. In working with Cree, Dene, and Dakota communities in northern Saskatchewan, it draws on generations of knowledge about living with and managing wildfire. This project supports community-led research, builds local wildfire expertise, and develops best practices that reduce risk and shape provincial fire management. I want to acknowledge also the funding announced today by Parliamentary Secretary Hogan and Minister Hodgins. These investments will directly support Yorkton Tribal Council member communities and help improve their firefighting capacity and preparedness. Pour conclure, cette saison de feux de forêt a été
To conclude, this wildfire season has been devastating for far too many communities across Canada. For First Nations in particular, there have been tragedies and challenges that have tested their resilience. It's clear that there's still a lot of work to be done.
time again, you remind us what true community means. To all those First Nations communities leading the way across the country, your strength shines through. You remind us of what community means and what courage truly looks like. We are here with you not just for this season, but through every step ahead. Stay safe and please take care of yourselves and take care of one another. The challenges that we are facing can only be faced and worked on by collaborating and supporting one another. Miigwech mshwe. Thank you. Merci.
Okay, thank you very much. We will now move on to the question period. I will start in the room if there are any questions for journalists in the room. Okay, we will move online. Once again, please use the raise hand function if you have a question, one question, one follow up. I will begin with Emily Hawes from the Globe and Mail.
Me? Oh, I think it's, yeah, okay. Hello. What do you make of the decision that Nova Scotia made to ban people from entering the woods?
Well, I'm happy to address that. Whether you agree with the decision or not, I think we all have to acknowledge that it underlines just how severe this particular moment is, and that the East Coast is seeing, unprecedented levels of dryness that are fueling forest fires, and this is going to be a consequence as we start to see a changing climate take its impacts on the world here. So, uh, look, provinces have an awful lot of information that's specific to their jurisdiction. I'm a former senior official at the government of Alberta. I fully appreciate that sometimes from the outside those decisions look different than on the inside. But I think what's important here is to underline that this is a really severe moment for firefighters and for fire risk in Canada. So it's important that we all acknowledge that and we do what we can to try to get these things under control.
I would just like to add to what Parliamentary Secretary Hogan just said, and that is that, we know that approximately half of forest fires are human caused, and that doesn't mean people set them deliberately, but what it does mean is that all kinds of different accidents, when we have hot and dry conditions, can lead to critical kind of wildfire situation. And that can include something like a piece of glass, actually just a piece of glass on the ground, and even use of certain kinds of vehicles and equipment. And so, from where I sit, it's so important for all of us as Canadians to do our part to make sure that we keep one another safe. Thank you.
Okay. And to follow up, what is the government specifically doing to prepare for the next 6 to 8 weeks, given that it seems like a wildfire season isn't necessarily slowing down?
Yes, and that's a great question. And if you listened to the technical brief this morning, absolutely, you're right. Wildfire season's not slowing down, and we will continue to do what we've done over the past, uh, basically since the start of the wildfire season, and that is continue to monitor the situation on a daily, virtually hourly basis. We will continue to um, coordinate and have communications with our federal, provincial, and territorial counterparts. We will continue to have discussions with our emergency management counterparts in the provinces and territories. And just by way of example, over the last few weeks, I've had a number of meetings with individual emergency management, that is my counterparts in provinces and territories. I've got two more scheduled for today with Nova Scotia and with New Brunswick. And so that's some of the work that we're doing. It's important to know that CIFC, which is the Canadian Integrated Firefighting Center, this is an organization that is supported by the federal government, and they assist us in coordinating the response to wildfires across the country. So when a province has a request for assistance, we can help them by communicating with CIFC and making sure that they have whatever they need. And I've already mentioned the kinds of assistance that we've been providing throughout the last number of months. So we'll carry on with that. And I think an important question is what we'll be doing with respect to the season next year. And I've already indicated, I think in the last couple of times that we've had this briefing and update, that we're working on strengthening how we respond to wildfires across the country.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll move on to Cara Morellone from Radio Canada. Please go ahead.
Thank you. I'll ask my question in English just because I'm unsure if anyone can reply in French, but if that's possible, please do so. I'm mainly wondering, like we've seen a lot of destructions as we kind of do now every year, but mainly focusing in Newfoundland, and we're wondering if there would be any extra financial help to rebuild once we've controlled the fires.
There is a disaster. There's a disaster fund, basically. There's a mechanism, and Minister Galmasti spoke about how EMAP works with Indigenous communities to support their rebuild efforts for communities that are not on reserve communities. There is a disaster financial assistance program, and basically we will help, we will assist the provinces in building back with respect to the losses suffered in wildfires. And we added in fairly recently a component of that which focuses on community resilience. And we're really seeking to encourage provinces and territories to not build back exactly the same way things were before, but to build back using, fire resistant materials, to take a number of steps to make sure that provinces and territories and municipalities and communities themselves can prepare to make our communities more resilient so that we can mitigate and reduce the amounts of losses that we suffer.
And I'm wondering if the federal government is considering having some kind of a guideline of what provinces should have, for example, for water bombers or everything. Like we see a lot of them in Atlantic Canada are helping the provinces around, but are you thinking of maybe requiring provinces to have certain of these, considering that the wildfires are becoming more and more of a thing?
So certainly we're exploring every option, and I've looked at a number of things, including how we might expand the humanitarian workforce. I've considered equipment as well. What I would like to say about the way that it works right now is that provinces and territories have their own fleets. They have their own water bomber fleets. And in addition to that, and we've seen great examples of this throughout the entire wildfire season so far, provinces, when they've got aircraft, water bombers, skimmers, bucketers, helicopters, when they've got assets that aren't being used at a particular point in time, there's movement of those assets from province to province, from province to territory, and vice versa. And I have to say that that system has served us really well so far through this wildfire season. And we've been able to use that coordination between provinces assisted by CIFC and also my department to make sure that provinces and communities have gotten the resources they need at a given point in time. That said, we are also looking at what we might be able to do to strengthen our equipment system, because what we do see, and I think my explanation has already pointed to this, there are provinces that are not as well resourced as others. And of course, there's perhaps a concern that if we were overwhelmed in another fire season, in a bigger way than we were this year, we would want to make sure that the system has capacity. And so, to make a long explanation shorter, I will definitely be looking at what we can do in terms of equipment, including water bombers and air tankers.
Merci, je vais faire la réponse en français aussi.
Thank you, and I will answer in French. So, in Indigenous Services Canada, we're working with communities to ensure that a 4-step process during a wildfire is followed. It begins with evacuation. So, first of all, putting people on notice if they're outside the community. Then coming back to the community and evaluating everything that happens after the wildfire. So we need to see what the infrastructure loss has been, how many buildings lost, and we work with communities to ensure that we can manage things as they reintegrate into the community. Then in terms of equipment and training, I've been very encouraged by Parliamentary Secretary Hogan's announcement about the 2 funds that will be there to ensure that everyone has enough training to fight wildfires. That's a real need. And I think the first line of defense is to have a team in the community that is sufficiently specialized that they can really focus on prevention. As Minister Olszewski said, we also have been checking the type of equipment and the processes that exist in the community to allow them to respond. And I think it also shows that we need to have a good dialogue with all departments to figure out how we can be more resilient together and how we can be more resilient for the next wildfire season. We know that this is a new reality, a kind of new normal, and we need to make sure that we're ready to defend Canada and the quality of life that we have in the summer as well.
Okay. I don't see any other raised hands. I'll do a last call for questions from reporters. Oh, okay. We have one in the room from the Canadian Press. Go ahead, Kyle.
Hi, thank you for taking our questions. To the Minister of Emergency Management, I just wonder, to what extent are you concerned about continuing use of the Canadian Armed Forces and whether or not their operational readiness is being impacted by having to respond? Thank you.
Sorry, can you repeat the question? You've just dropped off towards the latter part
Oh,
of the question. You were asking me to what extent?
to what extent are
Um,
you concerned about the continuing use of the Canadian Armed Forces, given their operational readiness levels and the amount of strain that's being put on the forces just in general?
yeah, I think that is definitely an issue. It's why we need to strengthen. It's part of the reason why we need to strengthen the system in other areas. And that includes, I think, a number of things. It includes things like what Minister Galmasti was just mentioning, making sure that, because where we've used the Canadian Armed Forces primarily, especially at the start of the wildfire season, was in evacuations of remote communities. And I think one of the things we can do is exactly as Minister Galmasti just suggested, is make sure that we have better ways of making the communities more resilient to wildfire, and also making sure that we have different ways of evacuating so we're not always reliant on the Canadian Armed Forces. So I think there are steps that we can take, things we can do in many different areas with respect to the way we respond to these wildfires to take some of the pressure off the Canadian Armed Forces, because you're absolutely right. You know, this is not their primary responsibility, it's not their primary duty. And we've been incredibly lucky to have the assistance of the armed forces for this wildfire season. We do need to look at things like resilience, like what else we do in terms of equipment and how we better manage resources to lessen the load on the armed forces.
Thank you. And I'm also wondering if, given the outlook over the next 3 months, if you have a specific message to Canadians or if you have particular concerns that you would like to outline for them. Just if there's anything you want to add at this point, basically.
You know, my message is to Canadians is that, you know, the federal government is so concerned about your safety, the safety of your families, your communities, your homes. And so, you know, we want you to stay safe. And so that means following all of the directions that are issued by fire authorities in the places where you live. Um, Information with respect to fire bans, etc., to just do everything that you can to stay safe. Um, it means having an evacuation kit sort of at the ready so that if you are, you know, if there is an evacuation alert in your community, that you're ready to evacuate. It means listening carefully to alert mechanisms like NPAS, the National Alerting System, and any other ways that your region and your local community has of notifying you about evacuations. It's doing all these things so that we can keep you as safe as possible, because honestly, the health and safety of Canadians is our first priority. And just on the health issue for a moment too, you know, it can be dangerous to have to inhale smoke, you know, for periods of time. And that's another area where local um, communiques with respect to, you know, what the smoke risk is in a particular area are really important. It's really important that people follow those so that they don't put their own health at risk. Thank you.
Okay,
Can I just also add a little bit to Minister Olszewski? I think it's really important to also, you know, be supportive of those elected leadership or emergency management that are really taking on the hard work of keeping you safe. I know that it can be extremely stressful to be evacuated. It can, you know, people can lose patience with the process of it. It's not something that's easily managed or controlled. Just encourage you to, you know, encourage your leadership, your team that is working to keep your communities safe, to give them that grace that they're trying to serve you in an extremely challenging time. That, you know, those words of encouragement and those messages of thanks and appreciation, I'm sure, are always appreciated by them.
Yeah, and I'll just add as well. We talk about fire season. Increasingly, fires are an all year event. And as Canadians, we need to be fire smart all year. We need to take precautions all year. And your governments will be here for you. But the best way to avoid the damages of fires is to make sure they don't happen in the first place. 50% of fires are caused by human activity. So be fire smart, be safe, and be good out there.
Okay, I do not see any other raised hands, so I will thank the ministers and conclude the press conference. Thank you.
Recording stopped.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Have a good week.
Cheers, all.
Thanks. See you, Corey. See you, Mandy.
See you.
See you soon.